you do speak on camera, don't worry about it, but it will be recorded. I have to just tell you legally that you are being recorded. All right, we're good to go? All right. I'll let Jeff sit down. Good evening. Hi, I'm Sean Dooley. I'm your state representative. Thank you guys for coming. The reason we originally I started working on this back in November, early December, was I wanted to bring Eversource out because we had a number of, oh shoot, I don't have a microphone. I need to have it.
It's right here.
Oh, we got one right there too. We got two. Is that working, Chris? All right. I'll start over. Hi, I'm Sean Dooley. I'm your state representative. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight. The reason we first started asking Eversource to come out for this meeting was end of November, beginning of December. We had a number of power outages around town. And so there was a lot of concerned citizens that were worried about that, wanted to figure out why this was happening, what we could do to prevent it, whether it was tree cutting or line clearing or whatever the case may be. We needed to resolve this situation. Since then, after we were able to finally book these three guys, some of the rates came out last month, and they were considerably higher than most people were used to paying. And so there was a lot of people that contacted me, and as well as on Facebook and other social media platforms, were very upset about the rate and how much their electric bill jumped and everything like that. So I asked them in the Eversource, and they graciously said, "Yep, we'll cover that as well." So tonight's going to be just kind of an open forum. They're going to make their presentation and tell you a little bit about it. Please be respectful. Don't get mad. Don't shoot the messenger. And tell you a little bit about what they're doing to help with the power outages, as well as what's going on with the rates, and how that's going to proceed in the future, and and how the whole overall process works. Rates are just established by the state through the Department of Public Utilities. It doesn't go through the legislature as a lot of people think. So I just wanted to turn it over to them. At the end, we'll be having plenty of questions and answers. And if anyone doesn't want to speak on camera afterwards, I'll be staying around, and these guys will be staying around to answer your questions one-on-one if anyone has a particular situation that they want to cover that they don't necessarily want to be on NCTV. So without further ado, Mark Reed.
Thank you so much, Representative. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Reed, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Eversource. We serve over 1.4 million customers in Massachusetts, most of them in the greater Boston area, down through the Cape. We also have customers out in the western part of the state. And as the rep indicated, we're happy to take questions, any concerns that you have. As he outlined, this was originally about some reliability issues in a couple of neighborhoods. So I have the head of operations for the Norfolk area and our lead engineer for Norfolk here to talk about reliability issues, and basically a little bit of engineering 101 about how we maintain the system. But we can forego all that if you want to get specifically to an area that you might have. I'll speak a little bit about the rate issue. The timing of the rate. First off, if you're someone that pays very close attention to your energy bill, you'll see that there is a so-called energy charge or supply charge and a delivery charge. The energy charge went up the beginning of January 1st. Our prices change every 6 months. This is all part of deregulation, which happened back in 1998, where the legislature and also via regulation, utilities such as Eversource were put out of the generation business, and customers had the opportunity in some instances to buy from a competitive supplier, or they could stay with the incumbent utility and get what's called basic service, which is what we do on behalf of our customers. We buy power on the market and pass it directly through to customers. And the way we price customers through regulation is to buy 50% of our supply at different times. So we're not buying 100% at one time in case there was a particular price spike, and everybody would have to absorb that at one time. So we change prices every 6 months, I said, effective January 1st and July 1st. And the winter months are always the most expensive for energy. And again, this is all market driven because the energy markets have been deregulated. Before, when utilities owned generation, we could do forecasting and planning, and we would have to get approval for our prices. That's not the case anymore. We're buying just like anybody else. We have a little bit more expertise, and we're buying on behalf of more customers, so we think we can get a better price. But in any event, that happened to change on January 1st, and that was about a 2-cent per kilowatt increase. Also, what took effect January 1st was our approved rate increase, which amounted to, I think, about maybe 6 or 7% on just the delivery distribution rate for customers in the Norfolk area. That will change again to go lower effective February 1st, because part of what makes up our cost of service is any operating costs we have, including taxes. And as a result of the recently enacted federal tax legislation drastically reducing corporate income tax, we're passing that savings right along to customers. So that was a slight increase in your distribution charge on your bill, comparing from your December bill to your January bill. That distribution charge will go down slightly again. Now, I've looked at a couple of sample bills from the Norfolk area, and I can understand the sticker shock that some people are feeling, but as I look at this one sample bill, what is driving the increase, which is almost doubled, is the usage. So we had a relatively mild December, and usage in this particular bill was about 500 kilowatt hours. And in the January bill for the same house, same customer, it almost doubled to 900 kilowatts. So that's going to drive a price difference of almost double in a bill. But one can understand a customer seeing that bill and saying, my God, within 1 month because of this rate increase, my bill is almost doubled. But in this particular instance, and given the weather that we had in December I should say, into January, which had an impact on your usage, it's also going to have an impact on energy prices, probably will be reflected in next winter's bills. A lot of those things, sort of a perfect type storm, which would account for people's very, reaction to what they see on their bills seemingly doubled. So, I mean, that's sort of the rate story. If there's any questions specifically on the rates, or yes, sir.
You mentioned that the rate's going to drop. You're going to give that tax back to the
Correct.
people. You said it went up 6. Is it going to drop down back to?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It'll be about a 3% increase comparing the February rate to the December rate. So it instead of having gone up about 6%, it'll only go up 3%. So that, for an average customer is about 750 kilowatt hours a month. That's about a $4 a month increase. So that's thank you for asking that. I left that rather significant point out. So that's the net increase for our rate case, or our rate increase after the tax adjustment, is about a 3% rate increase for residents in the Norfolk area, greater Boston area.
So there was an increase? But I thought you said we were going to get a decrease.
Well, there was an original increase that was going to take effect January 1st. Subsequently, the federal tax change was enacted, which turned into a significant cost of service reduction for us that we're passing on to customers. So we're reducing the increase is how that nets out. So instead of having a 6 or 7% increase, it's only a 3% increase in your rates.
So it's going to come down 3%?
Correct. The new rate effective January 1 will come down 3%. Well, I'm sorry. It'll come down, yeah, I guess it'll be about the same, 3%. Instead of a 6 to 7% increase, you'll only have a 3% increase. So it's just that 1 month of January was slightly higher.
Is that just on the distribution?
That's just distribution. So, and again, the other increase, the 2%, the 2 cents per kilowatt change from your December bill to your January bill, that's effective through June, and that'll change in July. That's on your supplier side. Yes, sir.
Southgate, you're not gonna get over that, that actually goes into their system.
So you mentioned the price drops in July. How early
We're expecting.
Yeah, or sorry, your price changed. I shouldn't
Yeah.
assume it drops. How early do you forecast, and do you publish that forecast? So
We would be seeking approval probably around the mid to late May timeframe with the Department of Public Utilities. So we'd be in the we've already bought 50% of the load that we would need for the July through December period. We'd be buying the rest of it, and then there'd be a blended rate. And we would be submitting those for approval sometime in mid-May.
So depending on what you buy that at, it could go up another 2 cents, or it could go
It's
down.
possible, but ordinarily we see the prices drop going into the summer. The concern is, given what happened this past winter with the tight gas supply and the need to burn oil and other constraints in the market, we might see what generators want to recollect, or want to collect, I should say, from this winter reflected in next winter's rates. But we're not there yet. And again, that's why we buy 50% at a time, so we're not always buying at some, peak market condition.
When you buy, is it only twice a year, like when the increase?
No,
you
as
said
I say, we're buying
month to month?
roughly 4 times a year, so
okay.
that we're buying 50% of our load at 2 different times for 2 different periods. So to avoid just what you're suggesting, so we're not at getting everything that could possibly be subject to a peak price.
Is this regulated by the state, how much you can increase?
Not on the supply side. On the delivery side, absolutely. Everything we do is approved by the state, and
They put a cap on that, or?
it's an adjudicatory process where we come in with documentary evidence about what we think we are entitled to maintain the system. We have to prove our case. The Attorney General's involved, intervening parties are involved, and then just as a court, would determine the merits of your case, they make a decision. So there's not a cap per se, but we asked for a certain amount, and we got, maybe 30% of what we were asking for, which is sort of typical in these cases. So there's not a cap per se, and the issue on the supply side is it's unregulated. It's a market-based rate, which you can kind of debate the merits of whether deregulating that was a good thing or a bad thing. The suggestion was if it's open to markets, it's going to be more competitive, and then the prices will come down. That hasn't been our experience from what we've observed. Yes?
I have a question. Now, thank you. Now that you explained the increase and stuff, I don't believe that affects my bill. As of December, which there was no increase, am I correct? You said the increases started January?
Correct.
In December, right after the blackout, the brownout, we had a brownout up in my area,
An
which is
outage, sure.
Hanover Street.
What's the street, I'm sorry?
Hanover.
Hanover.
Lost everything in my house.
Yep.
Cost thousands of dollars. This is the second one. We had one in the spring, and now this is the second one. Now, after that outage, after I had to replace everything in my house, including heat pumps, my garage doors, my furnace, my washers, dryers, everything, the bill comes, and it's gone from $63.70 to $327.38. The following month, which is January, which is the increase supposedly, it went to $333.67. So I don't believe that has to do with the increase, the outages, or the increase that you were just talking about. These increases in these prices are just, it started way before.
Well, I mean, it could be usage.
I'm not home. How
Well,
do you
well,
use it?
well, I'm
How do
just-
you- In my whole
I-
time I've lived there, I called them. In the whole time I've lived there, it's never been close to this usage.
I'd love to have a look at the bill, and we can
Yeah, you
try
can
to,
have it.
absolutely, yeah.
So I ask,
And on-
are the
but-
meters affected by these outages?
It could
And if
be.
the meters are infected,
We'd want to check that for you, absolutely. And we'd also want to check to see if there was anything that we did that might have caused damage to your appliances and anything else in your house.
Anything you did, everything.
Well, you should file a claim, and we would
I did it
review.
with my insurance company.
Okay. Well, then they may subrogate with us to see if we had done anything
But
that caused
so-
that outage.
so none of this-
I'll take a look at that just to see, because the numbers, we can't change those numbers, the multipliers. The only thing that changes on the bill is the usage number, which is driven by the meter. And if there's a problem with the meter, we would go back and make an adjustment. So if you called the company, which you don't have to do now because you've told me,
I've already called the company.
okay, did they say they were going to?
Send somebody out.
Yeah, so they're going to check the meter. Okay, well, I'll make sure that happens. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a possible issue.
As I say, and I know there was one other family, that, at least one that I know of, that was in your area, so it was affected by a lot of the power outages and everything like that. And Eversource did come out and found out there was a problem with the meter, and we don't necessarily know how long it's been going on or anything like that, but they were able to fix it and determine everything, and they gave them a big rebate. So I know of at least one case where, what Mark is saying is where they actually came out and they're like, yep, nope, all of these, problems were based on a faulty meter. I don't know if it was caused, what caused it, but I know it did happen. So at least I know of at least one where they fixed it.
Yes.
How can you tell if the meter is faulty? My bill went from $396. My bill went from $396 to $755. How do you tell if the meter
Test
is
the meter.
faulty?
Somebody would test the meter. If you felt the usage does not match what you believe the usage should be, we would check the meter.
Well, it was a very cold month, so of
Right.
course, but I was shocked.
I mean, that's not atypical. I mean, that's what we've been experiencing. That's what we've been hearing from customers, and we understand that the amount of usage that happens during a month like we had in January, given that severe weather, where whether it's a heat pump or whatever you have,
Electric heat,
yeah,
electric baseboard heat.
That's a
Yeah,
lot. That's
with
a lot of
being
usage.
cold, not
Yeah.
even
Right.
having it on.
Right. But I mean,
Most
it's not
rooms.
a matter of how high you have it set. It's just the constant demand on that. So, but again, be happy to go out and have the meter check if you feel it's not
Right.
reflective
But the
of.
brownouts, I mean, it happened at least 2 or 3 times.
And what street?
Park Street.
Park Street.
I got the text messages, if you want to know the dates, from NSTAR. I'm sorry, Eversource.
He should know them. He has to review all that, but we'll check.
Years we've lived here, we've never had brownouts. What is causing a brownout? I had never heard of
We'll get to that. They're outages. I mean, that's what they are. Power goes out, and these two gentlemen will be able to talk about sort of what the drivers are for those issues and address what we do about them and what we'll be doing about it going forward to improve service.
Can you provide just a quick definition between the difference of blackout and brownout?
Well, there's not, I mean, we don't use those terms. I mean, when we usually talk about blackouts, it's usually a more system-wide issue that has to do with transmission. I mean, we're talking here about area outages that could be a function of our equipment failure, tree contact caused by, could be a car accident, obviously a storm. Those are outages. We wouldn't call those blackouts or brownouts. That usually suggests a lack of capacity in the system, meaning energy isn't getting there, not a matter of distribution. It's the whole business of the distinction between energy and delivery that we talked about on the bill. We're the distribution company. I mean, we're responsible for the pipes, wires, and poles that serve the residents, not the energy that comes over those. That's somebody else is producing that. We're buying that, and it's passed on through our system. So that's sort of the difference. That's usually the brownout, blackout is usually a suggestion that there's a lack of capacity in the system.
But the phrase brownout is not something that's used by your company?
Not usually, no.
not enough electricity. So
You say not usually. Is it ever used by your company?
No, I don't believe so. Not in the context of the delivery system, no.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding,
Oh, you have one? Oh, never mind. I have hello.
it's my understanding that a brownout is a controlled event, whereas a blackout is an uncontrolled event, and
Could be, yeah.
that the grid has the capability of reducing the power
Yes.
in certain sections. So that implies control over the areas that are experiencing this diminished amount of power that's coming into a particular neighborhood or section of town. So I think there is a distinction between an uncontrolled event and an event that has some control over it in terms of deciding who gets what amount of power. when.
Absolutely.
So the term brownout does not apply?
I'm missing something about the significance of the terms. Blackouts, when we talk about blackouts and we talk about perhaps rolling blackouts or controlled blackouts, which is something that came out recently in the ISO's report, the New England ISO, which is the independent system operator that operates the grid. It's sort of the air traffic controller to make sure that our transmission system is adequate to serve the area, to make sure that the generation resource is adequate to serve the area. If they felt that there was insufficient capacity to serve an area, as you're suggesting, they could direct us to stop sending power to certain areas. But that's got nothing to do with our operation of our delivery system, our distribution system. Usually when a customer is complaining about an outage, a loss of power, it's ordinarily because something on our distribution system has gone wrong, whether, again, it's an equipment failure or
I get
an
that.
external event.
I get that. That's pretty clear.
Right.
But the brownout is a reduction in energy that's going through the distribution system. It's not a breakage or an outage.
Correct.
But isn't that controlled by the distribution channels?
No. Well, again, if we are directed to cut power to an area
Okay,
by the ISO
Okay.
because there's insufficient capacity to serve the whole region,
right.
we would do as directed.
Okay, so that brings up the question, how did those particular areas, those streets in this town, which I was affected as well, how was it determined who gets the brownout?
But what I'm saying is you did not experience a brownout. That's what I'm saying.
I experienced a reduction in power to my house.
you
To
lost
me,
power.
No, I didn't lose power. A diminishment of power.
You'll have to tell
By
us when that
50%.
was.
By 50%, I would say the lights dimmed, everything started to run slow, the refrigerator started to have trouble, everything just powered down to a level
That's
that
a
was
momentary.
not sufficient.
That's a momentary outage.
It wasn't a momentary
Well,
outage. It was a long-term event that lasted at least an hour. So rather than debate the term,
Right.
I don't want to debate the term.
Correct.
I want to talk about the behavior of the
Well,
system,
these
which is
Ken Rice can
diminished
talk about that.
power at
Right.
the recipient's home.
Right, and that's
all I wanna
that
say.
again. That was an event that Ken can speak to.
Okay.
Again, that wasn't something that we did purposefully. There was some reason for that. Okay, he can speak to that.
Okay.
Right? All right.
A rose is a rose.
Well, I was
Anything you want, but it's
you described something entirely differently. I understand what you're talking about. That
If I go to the dimmer over here,
All right.
and I
Why don't we have Ken come up and
Can
speak
I
to that?
finish my statement?
Absolutely.
If I push this dimmer and diminish the lights by 50%, would you agree that those lights are not getting full power? In that case, because this controls how much energy those lights are getting? Isn't that the same thing as a brownout, where there's a control that says, I'm going to reduce power to a particular area, which is a management decision? It's not an act of God or a natural outage. It's a decision in terms of how to distribute the power over the grid.
We don't have that dimmer.
What?
We don't have a dimmer to if we're comparing apples to apples.
Do you mind grabbing the microphone?
Yeah. Is there anything else for me before we get into the?
I have another question.
Sure.
The bill that you just showed that was
Yes.
double,
The high, yes.
is that again an all-electric house that's using that energy?
I'm not sure what it is. It was just it was an example of usage having basically doubled and reflecting in it.
But my bill didn't double, and I'm using oil, and my behavior at home has not changed. My bill has not doubled. So it seems to be certain types of heat that's causing that spike, because you're using more electric power in an all-electric house or baseboard heat that runs on electric energy.
Well, I was, the rep indicated that people were concerned about,
Let me talk. This is an important distinction. When you pull up a bill and you say, oh, this person's bill doubled. Well, why did it double? What is their nature of their energy? My bill didn't double. That bill doubled. Her bill and her bill doubled or tripled. So obviously it's because of the nature of the heating system that they have in their house. It's not what?
Mine hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Your,
3 years. I've lived in my house.
no, your heating system hasn't changed, but the consumption and the price that you're charged did change. Mine has not significantly changed. I've been here since 1989. I have blackouts all the time. I don't have brownouts or whatever we're talking about here. My issue is more I had to go out and buy a generator. That's how often we were having blackouts in this town, in certain sections more than others. But I do give credit that lately the notification system has worked very well. When I put in the call, I do get a timely response. I do get messages back saying what the ETA is to get the power up and running. So I give a lot of credit on that side of the house. But you got to be careful how you use language, how you describe things, because it's important about what these distinctions are.
I agree, and I'm trying to clarify the difference between the distribution system and what we can control and what we don't control, and the types of outages that customers experience. And again, the reason I raised this particular bill is just there's a number of components that go into the bottom line price for a customer. It's the effect of the distribution rate, the supply rate, and also usage. So if you're comparing 1 month to another and say my bill has doubled, it could be your usage from 1 month to the next month has doubled, and not that the rate increase reflected a 100% or 50% increase. That was the point of that illustration. You're absolutely right that it depends on what type of appliances, what type of heating system you have in your house. That's going to drive your usage. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Baldwin.
I had one question.
Operations. Yes, sir.
It was kind of related to that. I have oil heat,
Yep.
and my bill went up 50%. So does that mean that most of my bill is just the heating pump? Is what most of my electricity is going to?
If you had an energy audit,
Yeah, and they replaced all the. They said everything was fine. They replaced all the light bulbs with LED.
yeah, I mean,
So
my
that would mean that
understanding is that
most of my bill would be just the heating pump. Is
Yep.
all my electricity is going to my heating pump?
Yep.
And not much else.
that would be my
Is that
presumption.
normal?
Given the weather that we had in January, that's not normal, the weather.
But it's
that
normal
type
for
of
your
usage,
most of your, the percentage of my high percentage of my electric bill is just my heating pump.
That could be the case, yeah.
Okay. No. Yeah, it's tankless. Electric. Yeah. Okay.
So Mark Baldwin and Ken Rice can talk about the engineering components and operational components.
Good evening. My name is Mark Baldwin. I'm the Director of Operations for the Metro West area.
I'm Ken Rice. I'm the Manager of Engineering for the Metro West area. I have I brought a presentation. I only brought 10 copies, so I can distribute them however you want. Representative, just, I mean, if you, I don't know who you want, just, I don't have enough for everybody. I don't want to, like, there we go. Okay. I can either email it if you want more presents. I can email you a copy or get you more copies. I apologize, I didn't make enough.
I can make digital copies and distribute.
Oh, thank you. You can email it to them too if you want, or we can, whatever you can. So, do you want? We're going to go. So I just prepared this little presentation, but I want to make sure at the end we're going to answer all the questions you brought about brownouts, blackouts, and everything in between. Home momentaries and so the town. This is good. So town of Norfolk supplied by 5 15 kV feeders. So 15,000 or 13,800 volt feeders. One comes from the Medway substation. It's the feeds the most. Has the largest number of customers in Norfolk. It's called 65H1. The next circuit is 146H2, which is from the Walpole substation. 146H3 is from the Walpole substation as well. 146H9 is from Walpole substation, and 146H10. So you have the 5 feeders that feed all of the town. So they're all, each one feeds different portions of town, so you have some diversity around town. There's ties between each circuit, so, and there's, none of these circuits, and talking to your point about blackouts or brownouts, none of these circuits have capacity issues. So if we have enough capacity to feed the town under normal conditions. If something happens, it's not under because of we have enough capacity to feed. If there's an outage that's caused by like I don't know, it caused a momentary, or it could be something hit the ground. Anything that you see as an outage or a brownout that you call a brownout is caused by something in the system that's a fault. So, and we're working to fix, minimize those outages, and we try to fix them as quick as possible. So if you go to the next page, in 2016, the town experienced 56 outages affecting 9,398 customers. So it's not very good. So I know Mark and Mark were here about 6 months ago, a year ago. So, and I worked with them. We're trying to figure out ways to improve. So I'm going to go through that to improve reliability. If you look in 2017, it's a little better. It's still not great, but you had 45 outages affecting 5,724 customers.
And some of the, I mean, you can see that the number of outages didn't drop that much, but the actual customer count dropped quite a bit. And what you'll see is we are putting a lot of money into our automation system. So what you'll see, instead of having to send somebody out to open a switch, we control it from our Boston Control Center, can open and close switches in the field, which is we're constantly trying to reduce the size of the outage. So years ago, you might have had between two devices, you might have had 1,500 customers. We're now pushing that down to the 500-600 customer range, so that if there is a car, a car that strikes a pole, that we can reduce the number of customers affected and do it remotely so it happens quickly. When we open and close those switches, you will see a momentary loss of power. So it usually takes anywhere from, could be 20 to 30 seconds for the system to identify where the fault is, for the person in dispatch center to take a look at his display and identify where that fault is, and then switch the system accordingly so that you narrow that area down. So sometimes you'll see a lights flash 3 times and then go out. That's usually a reclosure. So it's trying to determine where that fault is. And again, we do get a lot of questions sometimes. Why did I went to bed, I had lights. I woke up, I had lights, but in the middle of the night, my clocks went. A lot of times that's what happens, is we're switching on the system. There was this, a branch that came down, took out a part of the circuit, and during that switching, you did see a momentary outage.
And then we put a note down October 31st, that October 29th, 30th, 31st, that kind of the wind event we had at the end of October, the town, we performed, compared to the rest of our system, performed pretty well. 6 outages, 432 customers. I mean, it wasn't 0, but it was better than the rest of the system. So we want to talk, since some of the things we've done in the last 2 years, we've installed 2 radio-controlled switches. We call them ASUs. They're radio-controlled and auto-sectionalizing switches. We've replaced 159 S&C cutouts. They were a problematic cutout that were causing outages in our system. We replaced all those. We performed, in the middle of 2006, we know we were having reliability issues, so we performed reliability patrols in the summer into the fall of 2016. Then we addressed all the issues in late 2016, early 2017. Then after the October 31st, 30th, 31st storm, we did another patrol of the whole system, and we were working on fixing those issues we found. And in 2018, we're going to install 2 additional ASU switches. And that's just in the town of Norfolk. We're also going to look for the rest of the
feeds are coming from Walpole, coming from Medway. So some of the technology advances that we're doing in those towns ultimately affect the Norfolk area. But we identified a couple, and specifically in this town, where we needed to get from manual to automated switches to place up.
So the next page, we talked about tree trimming. It's the number one cause of outages in the town is trees. So we're constantly looking to improve our tree trimming. So you can see there's the 5 circuits that feed the town. 65H1 was pruned last year. 146H2 was pruned, 65H1 was pruned in 2016. 146H2 was pruned last year. 146H3 and 146H9 were pruned in 2016. 146H10 was pruned in 2015, and it's going to be pruned again this year. And then to talk about some removals, I'm not going to get into it, but we've also removed a lot of, we do the tree trimming, so we try to get the window of trees around the wires to get our clearances. But then we also remove as many hazard trees as we can. We work with the town to make sure that we don't take down too many trees, but anything that could, like, a hazard tree is something that could fall into the wires from, it could be on someone's property or a town property. So we work with either residents or the town on that. Yes? Oh.
Thank you. I had a question on the tree trimming. If I have a pole that comes down my driveway and then it directs it to the house. Now, if I identify some of those trees, is that something Eversource comes, looks at and says, no, you're fine, or yes, these need to come down? Or is that something that I have to foot the bill for since it's on my private property?
It's on your property, it's your tree. But if it's in the public way, then we can work with the town to remove that tree, especially if it's near any of the primary wires that could ultimately affect an entire street or, neighborhood.
But ultimately, if it falls, it's still going to take out power, like kind of like the tree that you just, the scenario that you mentioned.
Yes.
If we view it as if it's viewed as a hazard tree, even if it's on private property, it's going to come into the public way. That's a hazard tree. If it's just on your property and hitting your wires, that's consider your responsibility.
Right.
Sorry.
No.
The next few pages are, I just showed you the diagrams of every circuit that feeds the town of Medway, and I plotted the top 10 outages in the town since January 1st, 2016 by customer count. So you can see 65H1 has the majority of them. And if you look at them, it's either vehicles or vehicle strikes, which is a car hitting a pole on Village Street, actually in Medway, because you're fed from Medway, through Medway, and into through Milliston into Norfolk. And you can see also there's a lot of tree-related issues, but this was before we trimmed it, so since we've trimmed it, it's been, we've seen some improvement.
And we also are on a 4-year trim cycle, so every 4 years we will trim every single circuit. And we're also looking, as Ken's plotted these outages, we do it on a daily basis, we're plotting, and if there was a large customer impact caused by a tree, we have arborists that work for us. They usually are dispatched the next morning, go take a look at that tree. Is it a decaying tree? Is there other trees, possibly in that area that could, cause an outage? And we try to address that, outside of that every 4 year. But, it's been a best practice in the industry to try to get to a 4-year, and we are on that cycle now.
Again, on 65H1, that's the section that you talked about the last time you were here. And what? Internal tie switch. So basically, if you look at that, so if you want to, the power flows down through the R, which is a recloser. It's radio controlled. You see, it goes around, and so it's kind of in a loop, but we can't loop it, so we put that open. There's an open in the middle. That's what it is. Okay. Then 146H2 is the next print. It feeds a piece of Norfolk. It's fed out of the Walpole substation. One of the things we're doing this switch, I think we're going to add a new switch here, right? We're going to replace those with a new automated switch at the Medfield border. 146H3 is also fed from the Walpole substation, goes through Walpole. We had August 11th, we had a large outage that affected a lot of customers in Norfolk of last year. The next circuit is 146H9. It feeds a good chunk of Norfolk, and it's fed from the Walpole substation as well. And 146H10, again, another switch we're going to add is at the Forest Road in Norfolk. This feeds a piece of Norfolk, goes from the Walpole substation into Millis through Norfolk. So just want to give you, this kind of gives you an overview of the electric supply and where we're seeing reliability. Like Mark and I, every day, our number one mission or concern is outages. So every morning we have a call, 8 o'clock in the morning, we talk about every outage that happened in the system. Anything that's over, and anything that's significant, we're gonna see if we need to do something to address it. If it's, you know, one house, two houses, we might not, we're still gonna look at it, but it's anything big, we're gonna look at, do we need to add more additional switches? What do we need? We need a reconductor. What do we need to do to improve reliability? So I know we all hear you, so I'm not, you know, I know we had some term, what we call outages versus brownouts, but our goal is, and we would never intentionally ever take a customer out or read power. It's usually something happened in the system that caused it. And so I don't, we want to.
To address a couple of things that came up earlier, there's a couple common things that happen during a storm. Wind and obviously tree damage is prevalent. So the connections to the transformer, sometimes you have two high sides of your transformer. You may lose one of those high sides. That would degrade the power going to your house. Again, we don't control that. That's usually a connection to the house that's been loosened. It's also, you probably only have partial power to your house. To be honest, that's usually one of the last people to be restored. And you may ask why, because we have a lot of people without any power. So we try to get them on first, obviously, and then get to some of the partial power calls. Also, you may have a bad neutral. So I've heard of issues where your neutral parts, right, and you do not have a return of supply going from the pole to your house and then back out on the street again. That can cause internal damage to your home, to TVs, to washers and dryers, things of that nature. A lot of our system, not all of it, is fed underground. Underground has an issue where you have corrosion more so than in the overhead, and you tend to lose one leg or another, and that causes partial power to homes. So there's a lot of factors. I could also say that a phase could come off the glass. You could have a high impedance where the phase gets in contact with a neutral and is sending high voltage through the system. So there's numerous things that can happen. I don't want to say there's just one issue over another. But one thing is we don't lower or raise necessarily the power throughout the system. Occasionally in the summertime, you may see that we raise it by a volt or two, and that's just at the substation because of demand on the system. But that's just to keep it at the regulated level that we need to keep it at.
The only thing actually, Mark, there is regulators on these circuits, so sometimes we have faulty regulators. That could cause what appears, so if there's a piece of equipment, so it comes from the substation, and it's a far distance to where you are, to where the customers are. So we put these things called regulators in. They help regulate the voltage, keep it high, or keep it at a good level, or keep it at a good level. And sometimes if there was a faulty, you could experience low voltage, high voltage conditions. So that's...
And usually what we'll do is, a troubleshooter will be dispatched. They'll go out and we'll take voltage readings all throughout the system to make sure that, and then get that back, put that piece of equipment back into service.
This, what we call a brownout, happened after a storm. I mean, there was a reason for it.
Yep.
And I believe, but the police and the fire came to all of our homes and told us to shut our, they told us what it was.
That's so when I mentioned the return path, right? That's the wire that might have broken, caused by a tree
I don't know,
or.
but the police and the fire came to all of our homes and told us.
We can look in. We can
Shut off the main.
Yeah, that means they probably lost the neutrals, and you can get crazy voltages. You have to.
Yeah, and I don't remember what they told me, but I think something happened on Park Street.
Park Street. You live on
Hanover.
I have a question during the low voltage. Like you said, your house isn't getting it. I get that. Now, do you get billed for the full low voltage?
No, it'll only be at the usage that the.
Whatever the usage is.
It will.
Based on the power that flows through that meter.
Okay.
You have the distribution centers, like you said, one from Medway and mostly from Walpole.
Walpole, yeah.
Now, can you I live on the Medway distribution line. I live right over the bridge. When the power goes out, come over the bridge, everybody's got power. Aggravating. But can you have a switch that would take it from this side of the bridge and switch it over to that side, or you can't do that at all?
No, you can. So it doesn't matter what town it's going through. We typically look at how many customers are in between switches. It's
So you're
effective.
You're probably right here, right? You're off.
I'm right over the bridge,
Right
225.
over the Charles. So if you cross the street.
Oh, no, right over Main Street,
On
right
Main
over the
Street,
train,
Main Street.
the other side of the train tracks here.
But typically, we look at customer counts. How can we best isolate so the fewest number of customers will be affected?
Right.
And that's kind of how
I
we make our
understand that, but I didn't know when you start switching automatically, you work your way down the line. Now, is there any way to, say the problem's right on Medway Street?
Yep.
Can you get power from this side of the bridge?
Yes.
Over?
Yes.
How come they don't do that? Many a times,
We could look at the way the circuit's configured. I'm not sure where the switches are and where you are.
Yeah.
But I thought with,
Right after this, we can take a
yeah, we can look at it.
and show you how we reroute.
I figure it's on Medway Street. There's got to be a switch.
Yeah, no, it's meant as we,
Sure, Medway definitely does.
If you see Boardman Street, I live right opposite Boardman Street. But I was just wondering,
so it's coming off.
Yes.
So you live off Medway, right? Yes.
I live on Main, live between Medway and Boardman on Main Street.
Unfortunately, these are very diagrammatic. We don't have all the.
We don't
Yeah.
have every
So that's what
street
we're
on there.
Yeah.
But we could, after this, we could take a
I was
look
just
at it.
wondering why it can't be switched from this side of the bridge over if they can't get it to come down. I didn't,
Well, we added this, we had the switch, right? We had
Yes.
this switch. So that's the, how much,
where's that switch?
this switch is on Medway Street. So we
Yeah.
added this, like six
Right.
months ago, or?
Yes,
Just because of that, we wanted to be able to get, because before it was, when this went out, everything was.
that whole area.
Right,
went
that
up.
whole, yeah,
It's a
okay.
backup, so we have this. we
Where
have a tie
that
actually
community
from-
is,
right.
the
So we have
55
So right
community.
now you have, a tie with the Walpole circuit.
Okay,
Comes
that's,
through and we can open that automatically, then we can,
And there's some other manual.
yeah, some manual ties, so we can, manual switches, so,
yeah, I
It depends
was-
where
I
you
was
are
just
at-
wondering, it was just
yeah.
where I live so close to the line, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just, it has improved. I've been here 34 years, and when I first moved here, if it rained, I lost power.
Right.
You'll remember. It's improved 100%, believe me.
Still, now it only goes out like for enough to throw off.
Everything.
Clock and
Yes.
everything. It only goes out
Let's-
for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's, so everything, we keep putting the automated switches in, the problem is that is basically you're gonna be out for less than a minute, but you're gonna have to reset your clocks. That's a bad.
I can live with it.
It is possible.
Yeah, it should be automatic. Hi.
I just had a question regarding this rate reduction. I came in a little late. I just had a question regarding this rate reduction. Is that is that if Eversource is your supplier, you get a rate reduction?
Yeah,
The
what
federal
is
tax?
what is the question? I
Uh,
mean, Eversource, it serves.
Eversource was going
Norfolk.
to be providing a revenue decrease to the customers due to the new federal tax law.
Correct.
Says
Your,
here.
your rate went up effective January 1, and it's going to go down slightly effective February 1. So it's a net increase from December of only 3%. And I know that's confusing, but prior to the federal tax law, which dramatically reduced corporate taxes, we got a rate increase from the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities effective January 1. Once the tax law came into effect, reducing our taxes, we voluntarily reduced the rate increase to a lower amount. So it's only a 3% rate increase. It's on the second page there.
And how will that show or manifest itself on the bill? Will it show in the delivery charge?
Delivery, yes.
So that would only affect people that have Eversource as their supplier?
No, that affects all Eversource customers.
All Eversource
Eversource
customers.
supply customers would have seen a 2-cent increase from December to January 1 on their supply.
Okay, and the generation service charge, is that made up solely of supplier costs?
Correct,
So that's the supplier?
correct.
Okay. I do see some variation in the energy conservation charge. There's been some changes. So I don't know, I don't know how that's going to show in the next bill, so. The only thing that's going to go down lower or change is did you just say? the
Distribution rate,
Distribution rate,
Right.
okay.
slightly. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
You were talking about the meters get messed up once in a while. Is that a result of these blackouts? Could it affect that, or just age of the meter? How often should they be tested?
Do you know that?
I don't, to be honest with you. So, I mean,
anything-
there's always a chance that if you're sending high voltage back through, that meter could get damaged. We have vans that drive around and ping the meter, right? And usually basically it just sends a signal back to the van, and that's how you get a calculation of what the meter's reading.
That's how they're reading it, right?
That's how they're reading them.
Right.
So usually, unless something's drastically out of whack, it's giving you basically a consistent reading. Usually, again, I look at mine. I happen to be National Grid, but I can pretty much look January and say, I'm pretty close to where I was last year. I can take a look at the weather and say, I'm pretty close on. So typically, if it goes out of whack, then if you call our customer service, we'll send a technician out, and they can test the meter.
Okay, I just wanted
But
to know.
no specific time frame on exchange.
That's the best thing to do. Say if you see an anomaly in your bill, if something like that happens, you should call us and we'll test it.
Unless it's way down.
And you can leave, yeah.
Any other questions? I was going to say, I think it's funny, Mark's in, you can tell he's not a politician because he's talking about this still net 3% increase. A politician would be like, nope, we heard what you had to say, it's going down 50% next month, which it's going down from 7% to 3%. So, I appreciate his trying to be as transparent as possible. And so, Jeff, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a
Oh,
question
okay.
real quick. Thank you, Sean. We appreciate you all coming out. Some of the concerns we had, which is why Sean had you asked you to come, is we had one thread on our community page. Essentially, there were over 215 comments on a thread. So where you have several people who say they have a concern with their bill going up, but when you have over 200 people making a comment that their bills went up 100, 200, 300%, it's a major concern. So how are we going to address that?
A lot of them elderly, you can't have an end of
My bill doubled, and I was surprised. I did a comparison in the last 3 years, and nothing close. I've never had that type of steep, none. And the people I've spoken to have never had that as well, and they looked at it over the last 2-3 years. So there's an issue. There's an issue that needs to be corrected.
One of the things I looked at on my bill more than doubled as well. And I have geothermal, so my electric bill's normally high anyways, just because I don't have any gas or oil. So it's all based on pumps that are in the ground, but the pumps run constantly. And so what I looked at mine was when I compared the December to, and I'm not defending these guys, but I just did my own analysis. The rate wasn't necessarily that much different. It was the fact that my December bill was I think 27 days, and my January bill was 35 days usage. So that was a big difference. And my December bill was also an estimate, and my January bill was an actual reading. So, possibly my my November and December were actually artificially low, and then when they actually did the the actual meter reading, it happened to be, kind of a combination of all three things. Because I called and that was one of the things they're like, no, this is an actual reading versus an estimated reading. So they may have been my usage may have been up for November and December, but it all caught up in January. It was a longer period, a real rate, and that first of the year, end of December, first of the year where we were at 0 degrees for the full 2 weeks, added it up. So I mean, I looked at my actual usage and I'm like, all right, it wasn't. I don't know if that's. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. Whether this everything evens out. Hopefully, it was just an anomaly. But that's what I'm here for. For anyone that has any concerns, if you're having trouble getting a hold of Eversource, or you have issues, if you think there's a problem with your meter or anything along those lines, and you can't get through, call me. Call my office. Will Rigdon here is my chief of staff. Call us, and we have. I can talk to Mark. I obviously have a good enough relationship with Eversource that these gentlemen gave up their evening on a Monday night. I'm sure they would rather be home with their families than down here chatting with us. But
So would we.
Yeah, exactly.
So would we, Sean. So
exactly. But
I already got yelled at by my wife because I wasn't home watching the kids. So
you're never home. You have something every single night. So
yeah, not touching
you're
that
not touching that one. Okay. So, I mean, so that's one of the things. If you have a problem reaching out, sometimes it's hard. You're going through this chain system, and you're pressing 2 to speak to someone, and 3 to this, and 4 to that, and you get caught in this loop. And if you're not having any success, and you still have issues and problems or questions, you think your meter's off and things like that, let me know, and I can reach out, and hopefully, some of my channels will work, a little more easily. And so we're happy to do that. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing. I do as your state rep. I try to bring these guys down. They, so they hear your concerns. They're obviously taking them seriously because they're here. But we want to make sure, as we said, we brought them down about a year ago, and they put in the 2 additional switching units because we were having so many blackouts, coming from Millis. Because there was nothing from, almost the center of, I think it was up on Village Street, and the next one wasn't until almost the center of town. So there was nothing coming through. So they were able to put in 2 different switching units because we were losing all sorts of, power, especially with all the additional houses that were put in, like Village of River Edge and Pin Oaks and all the 55 plus, it was a huge spike of, whereas last time they looked at it, 5 years before, none of those houses were there. So all of a sudden they had, an additional 400 houses in that one particular area. And so I guess, one of the things that I would like to, address with you guys is, or ask you to just be cognizant of, we have a substantial amount of, we have 7 different 40Bs being pushed on the town right now. So we have, unfortunately, hopefully we can stop some of them, but we have a huge amount of development on all different areas. So, especially since we're fed from all these other towns, there's going to be a big concern with the influx of additional houses. And so, if you can try to, we can sit down and go through some of the engineering and look at, try to, hopefully I can show you where they're being slated and everything like that, and we can at least look to see where the process is, whether it's feeding from Franklin or, and hopefully we can make some redundant systems as well. So, if the Medway line does come, killed out, we can backfeed it from Franklin or something along those lines, or bring it from Walpole.
There's no connection to Franklin because it's National Grid.
Right.
Oh, okay. So Walpole.
Well, I live right near Franklin. And
Right,
there's no benefit of
Exactly.
hanging anyway.
Well, I was going to say, we'll just tag it in, we won't tell National Grid. We'll just put it in. So, so sorry, I didn't realize they were. Yeah, Rentham's National Grid as well, so I know we can't get anything from the south. So, any other questions? Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out. I'm staying around. These guys are staying around, so if you have any one-on-one questions, more than happy to ask them. But if you're ever anything you need, whether it's on this issue or anything, please reach out to my office. That's what we're here for. We're here to help and try to at least, get some questions answered. We're not always, we don't always have the solution, unfortunately, but we can at least try to get you directed in the right area. All right. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.